Welcome to 805 Sports Talk, and we're done with spring break, and we had an action-packed Tuesday, so we got a lot of stuff to get through, so we're going to get right into it. Kenny, you were at the St. Joseph Righetti softball game. You know, you saw a lot of those teams over the weekend in the Best of the West tournament. Wasn't sure, quite what to expect, but you saw a pretty good game with St. Joseph pulling out a victory, back and forth for a little bit, but a couple defensive miscues from the Warriors, and the Knights took advantage. What did you learn from that matchup Tuesday?
St. Joseph out-defensed Righetti, and Skylar Johnson pitched a solid game, pitched a complete game. I think that's what it came down to. The St. Joseph softball team, I believe, St. Joseph softball team has not been to the playoffs, I don't believe, since 2012. I think they have a real chance. They are 3-2, and their last two games to close out the first half, it's not the toughest schedule, so they could be 4-3 at the end, very conceivably be at least 4-3 at the end of the first half, and that would probably put them in fourth place. So they're in the hunt. Righetti's not out of it, but they do have some work to do. I think Mike Roberson was correct and said they do need to improve defensively. So Righetti is in the hunt, but they have some work to do.
Now, you caught up with St. Joseph coach John Welch afterwards. This is his first season. I think a lot of people would kind of put a lot of credit to him for what he's done. Do you think he's kind of had a big part to do with it, or do you think the players are a lot more confident maybe? How big of a role do you think Welch has played?
Well, I think John's definitely played a role. John Valencia was a good coach, but I think John Welch may have changed the culture some. I think a lot of it is the players. Whatever John Welch is doing, I think they've bought in. You have to buy in. The players have to buy in. That's a big part of it. I do think a lot of it is the players themselves. They look disciplined. They are, as Paige Huguenard, one of their players, pointed out, they are communicating on defense more than they were before, and it's helped make their defense better. I think the single biggest difference, though, is that they have a solid number one starter in Skylar Johnson. You have to have the pitching in softball. It starts from there in softball. Okay.
Moving on to Pac-8 League Baseball. Kenny, you were at the softball game. I was over at Righetti at the baseball game, and you saw one good defensive team. There were two good defensive teams in my baseball game, but St. Joseph just had a little bit too much hitting for the Warriors. They got to Daxton Miller a little bit, scored those 4 runs that they needed for a 4-2 victory. So I know those teams got 2 more games this week, so we'll see how that series ends, but St. Joseph definitely kind of made an emphatic victory. Zach Trevino was solid on the mound. Really good defensive plays all around. Matt Salisbury made a real good throw to throw out Jaden Libertus at second. That really kind of stifled Righetti's little bit of a rally that they had going. So St. Joseph really looks solid. They've already matched their win total from a year ago. They went 10-20 last year. I think only about 6 league wins. They're 10-6 already this year. 4-3 in league. So St. Joseph under Cody Smith is definitely headed in the right direction this year. We'll see how they finish out that series. They host Righetti on Wednesday, and then that series will shift back to Righetti on Friday. So 2 more games to go there, but St. Joseph definitely started off on the right foot in that series. And I would like to see maybe a little bit more intensity out of Righetti. They're at home. St. Joseph rallied back, and Warriors didn't seem too interested in getting back into that game. So we'll see if it's a little bit different Wednesday and Friday, see if there's some more intensity out there. Righetti made the championship game last year in the CIF Southern section, so there's still a lot of pride in that program, and I expect them to come out a little more stronger in Wednesday's game in that series finale on Friday.
Had a bit of an intensity problem at times this year. I think Brian Tamuka hasn't always been as happy as he could have been with their intensity. So I think at times they have needed to pick that up. At times they've looked as intense as they needed to be. At times not.
Yeah, we know Matt Sauer kind of brought that out in the team. Zach Anderson, the catcher last year, really did that. Tomoka has a lot of experience, so I'm sure he'll get those guys headed in the right direction. Still a lot of baseball left to play here. Lorenzo, while we're out covering, diamond sports, you were over there on the tennis courts at Hancock as Orcutt Academy hosts Lompoc. Usually we can pencil that one in for an Orcutt Academy victory, but Lompoc, I don't know if it's surprising. Maybe Orcutt Academy is really down this year, but Lompoc's pulled off a couple impressive victories, and that continued Tuesday with the win over at Orcutt Academy. What did you see from the Braves on Tuesday?
Adam Milholland, the head coach at Lompoc, he denies the fact that he has a very experienced team, but yet the starters he has on that tennis court were guys who were there with him last year, and I'm starting to see the progress. I mean, they play with a lot of confidence. They're very aggressive at the net, and I know Orcutt Academy may not be like a Templeton or San Ynez, but it is a pretty solid victory. And I mean, this Spartans team, for what I saw, it's mainly freshmen and sophomores. So unfortunately for a guy like Art Lopez, he's doing a lot more teaching, but the guys are really putting in an effort for Orcutt Academy. But with Lompoc, also I have to add that they beat a very stout Cabrillo team. I mean, a Cabrillo team that's actually been a force on the tennis court as well. So, they've been moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I would still expect San Ynez to win that league championship. They've done that, consistently over the last several years. I know Templeton's kind of made some strides there, but maybe that Lompoc-San Ynez matchup will be a good one later on in the season. Sticking in the LPL, but moving to those diamond sports, we saw some interesting results on Tuesday with Nipomo scoring a baseball win over San Ynez. I don't think a lot of people expected that, but Nipomo is playing a lot better this year. I think they're just a half game back of San Ynez.
And they have no seniors.
And they have no seniors. Ricky Iniguez, I think, had 3 RBIs in that Tuesday win, so he's been solid. They did pretty well at their own tournament last week. They lost in the semifinals, so Sam Spears is doing a good job over there at Nipomo. They're kind of overlooked a little bit, but I think they're impressive.
I think they've been one of the pleasant surprises of this baseball season. They're right in there in the hunt. They're 7-4 in league games now.
Yeah, I think the LPL baseball season is kind of mirroring what we saw from the Pac-8 League boys basketball season, where it's like wide open. It seems like anybody can beat anybody on any given day there. We saw Orcutt Academy beat Santa Maria on Tuesday. Maybe some of us are not hoping, but maybe expecting Santa Maria to turn it on, and they still haven't done that yet this year. We saw Orcutt Academy losing games like 24-4 to Cabrillo earlier in the season, and here they are on Tuesday beating a Santa Maria team that a lot of people were expecting to compete for an LPL title this year. So we don't know what to make of Santa Maria, but it's getting closer and closer to the end of the season.
They're starting to run out of time. They really need to.
Yeah, exactly. If they're going to make a late push, it's got to happen. Today on Wednesday they're hosting Orcutt Academy, so if they're going to have any chance of making the playoffs, it's got to happen. This week for sure.
I'll add this about the situation Rich Haber is in and Santa Maria is in. I feel like that at this point you shouldn't even really worry about chasing an LPL title. Just finish out the year, try to make a playoff push, because
that's the situation they're in.
Yeah, I mean, the odds are already stacked against them, and they're in a different situation than they were last year.
All right, LPL softball, San Ynez scored a win over Nipomo. San Ynez, we talked about them last week. They're riding the ship at just the right time, making the semifinals last year, and I think they're going to, definitely make the playoffs this year. I don't know if the LPL title is in reach for those Pirates, but they're definitely kind of moving into shape. Orcutt Academy also got a big LPL win over Santa Maria on Tuesday. So, that's still up for grabs, and I'm kind of interested in that Friday matchup between Lompoc and Cabrillo. Lorenzo, you'll be at that one, so that should be a good LPL softball matchup on Friday. Those teams always seem to have a really good game when those two teams meet up. Sticking in the Lompoc Valley, but moving over to football, you got some news, Lorenzo, on Jacob Nunez landing his very first offer from San Jose State. How did he feel about that? And do you see him kind of sticking as a Mountain West athlete? What do you see the future holding for Jacob Nunez?
I do wonder if he did this, which stands for Spartans, but I could tell that there's a sigh of relief on Nunez's end, and I mean, it's not just an exciting moment for Jacob. It's an exciting moment for his family. I was told by Claudia Toronas, who's also his aunt, Jacob's being raised by a single mom. And as you guys know, I've done a lot of recruiting stories over the years. sometimes a lot of these prospects come from a one-parent household, and there's just so much stress with the parent trying to raise their kid but also trying to deal with college coaches. So it's a big sigh of relief for Jacob Nunez' mom. But one of the things that resonated with me in my conversation with Andrew Jones is that when you're a sophomore and you get this amount of attention, it means you're a special player. You're a once-in-a-lifetime player. And, I mean, I can't recall a lineman on Lompoc High who's had already this amount of scrutiny and this amount of national attention as a sophomore. But, you know, he's a good-sized kid, very physical, athletic, especially. His athleticism, to me, has improved a lot since being a wrestler and also being on the track as well. It's going to be hard to me to see Nunez maybe stay on the San Jose State radar, because I'm starting to think that he's going to get some Power Fives pretty soon. As we've seen Power 5 schools like Washington, like Cal, make their way over to Hug Stadium or make their way to Lompoc High to check in on the Braves. So I get this sense that it's going to be like that with Nunez. But if San Jose State manages to stay with Nunez between now and National Signing Day 2020, then I could probably see Nunez maybe gravitating toward the Silicon Valley. But I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting scenario with me trying to keep track of how Nunez does on the recruiting trail.
It's big to get that first one, though.
Yeah.
That means you're going somewhere, no matter
and
what else.
That can always
may bring.
Open the floodgates a little bit. You know, you might see more of those. I'm sure we will see more of those offers trickling in with him just being a sophomore.
I know we're Fresno State guys, Joe, but it is nice to see San Jose State taking a keen interest in area talent. I mean, Nunez isn't the only one on the San Jose State board. Caleb Thomas as well.
Yeah, they're doing a good job of recruiting this area, and I think there's a lot of kind of those hidden gems out here that you see. You know, you just see a guy like Josh Allen, who was on ESPN earlier today from Fireball. You know, a lot of people don't scout those areas. Fresno State didn't really scout that area, and then Wyoming picks up a guy like that, and then here he is possibly being, you know, the #1 overall pick. So you got to love those programs that kind of go after those hidden gems.
I will say this real quick about Josh Allen. To me, I don't look at it as Fresno State's loss. I look at it as Tim DeRuyter's loss. I look at it as his coaching staff's loss. I mean, they couldn't even locate like some of those Clovis or even Fresno schools with a GPS. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm sure that strikeout there still looms large with DeRuyter no longer at Fresno State. But we'll move on. But congrats to Jacob Nunez landing that first offer.
Yes, congratulations, Jacob. That first offer is big.
I'm sure it'll be the first of many.
All right. We haven't talked a whole lot about Hancock baseball, but you know, I just want to take a moment to kind of spend some time on what they've done this year. They're I believe 18-5 after a big 14-9 win over Oxnard on Tuesday, and Quinntin Perez has just been really solid for them. St. Joseph High grad, sophomore, leads the team in a ton of offensive categories. I think he's hitting .367 on the year, has about 3 home runs, 35 runs on the year. The next closest guy on the team has 22 runs, so he has a 13-run advantage for that team. So a great leadoff hitter, and I think it just goes to show what Hancock baseball does for a lot of these local guys. About 75-80% of the roster is local. So Chris Stevens does a good job of giving a lot of local guys time to develop and continue to play baseball here. So Quinntin Perez, I think, kind of just epitomizes that with the season he's had. And it's tough that he hurt himself last week in an at-bat. He's taking x-rays tomorrow, I believe, and hopefully will be back soon. But he's been a huge spark for that team.
They really need him to be back.
Yeah, and he was one of those guys, an infielder at St. Joe. I think he was on the varsity team sophomore, maybe even as a freshman, and he definitely stood out. I thought he had a potential as a Division I player, and I think he could still kind of get there. He's a sophomore now. He's just had an incredible season. Has 26 walks on the season, has just struck out 18 times. So when you see a guy who's walked more times than he struck out, that's huge. Has about a dozen more runs than anybody else on his team. Leads the team in stolen bases. I think he could improve as an infielder, but it's just a great to see that he's kind of continue to develop. And I definitely could see him playing, maybe at the 4-year level. Who knows? Maybe he'll get swooped up in the draft at some point. But it's just a great season, and he's kind of overlooked a little bit. And he was out in that win over Oxnard on Tuesday. And Daniel Curiel, another local guy, a Righetti guy, had a huge day with 6 RBIs, 5 hits. So it's good to see what Chris Stevens is doing with that program over there, recruiting local guys, giving local guys 2 more years of baseball, and they definitely produce with what Perez has done this year. Daniel Curiel has been huge. Jake Susterich, AG guy, has 6 homers on the year and is slugging like over 600. So great job with Hancock baseball. They're kind of in the middle of the road as a team, but a lot of local talent there with about 80% of the roster being local guys.
I'll add this about Perez. When you get a guy who's a do-everything type on the baseball field, he's eye candy for any college, any at the 4-year level. But here's another thing too, and I think we kind of like not really, we don't really talk about this much, but baseball seems like the one sport where size really doesn't matter. It's more about versatility. It's more about, can you withstand the 50, 100 games you can play, how consistent you are with hitting, how consistent you are on the defensive end. Perez is one of those consistent types.
Yeah, he's probably 5'8", 5'9", maybe 160 pounds, but he generates a lot of bat speed with 3 home runs. He had a few home runs in his high school career, so he's definitely one of those guys who can play, and one of those smaller infielder types that you do like to see.
It's the one sport where guys who are built like us do have a chance at Division I.
Well, track and field as well.
I mean, of the big 3, of the 3 so-called big 3 football, basketball.
Don't sleep on gymnastics as well. I mean, those guys are cut.
Yeah, and a credit to Quinntin as well. I think he also played. I know he played soccer the last 2 years or so at St. Joe, and he was really good on the soccer field, and also played a little bit of football there. So one of those multi-sport guys, kind of like Jacob Nunez, who play a few sports to kind of help them in their one main sport. So. And
I think to conclude that, it goes to show you Perez's stamina. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of running in soccer, and there's a lot of running in football. So the guy's already built for the baseball diamond.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of baseball, soccer, football players here. You might get a couple basketball, football players, but that's kind of the rare trio of sports right there. That's cool.
And I've seen him play many games, and I've rarely seen him. He's about as disciplined a hitter as you can ask for. I've rarely seen. In fact, I can't remember the last time. I mean, he does strike out sometimes, but I haven't. I can't remember the last time I saw him swing at a bad pitch.
Yeah, that's really what you want from your leadoff hitter as well. I think his on-base percentage is over 450, so he's definitely what you want from a leadoff guy. Hopefully he will be back to help the Hancock baseball team soon, sometime this week. Moving on to basketball. Basketball keeps on coming back. We got the Kiwanis All-Star Spectacular on Saturday night. The girls' game is at 5 p.m., and then we'll have some fun kind of extracurricular activities between the boys' game with some slam dunk contests. I think there is usually a 3-point contest as well.
I think both games are 3-point.
Yes, and then there's the boys' game at 7 p.m. I think the slam dunk contest might be pretty fun this year. If Elihu Cobb commits to do the slam dunk contest,
my favorite to win it.
He could win it. Jordan Tyler is also listed on the roster, so if those guys both do the slam dunk contest, that could be fun. I could see Leandrew Knight pulling off a couple dunks over there. So I think maybe this will be a fun slam dunk contest this year. I think Elijah Cooks might have done the one last year as well. So I think this could be a fun night of basketball.
I think Elijah did win it last year.
Actually, best dunker I've seen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun night. So head out to Hancock Saturday night. Girls game starts at 5. And I wrote about this a little earlier this week, but it's fun to see some of these players play together. We talk about all-star games, seeing the best play the best, but we'll get a chance to see Aaron Jenkins and Zane Sheckard on the floor at the same time. And we had a lot of debate on who the best player is in the area, with Aaron winning back-to-back all-area MVPs. Zane Sheckard is right there in terms of quality as a player, but we'll both get to see them play together with Desiree Hitch, Righetti's head coach, coaching that team. So that should be a lot of fun. Kenny, you've covered a lot of Kiwanis games. Is it mostly, guys having fun out there and playing? Is there a lot of competitiveness out there? What's kind of the atmosphere at the Kiwanis
It's a mixture of both. The boys and the girls want to win, but it is fun to see the camaraderie of players who are often friends who play on opposing teams during the regular season. They get to actually be on the same time. There is a camaraderie in the All-Star games that you don't see during the regular season. That's fun to see.
And I think another thing, too, is that when you look at the, say, for instance, the South girls roster, it's really a college basketball roster. And you got a bunch of Division II talent with Zane, with Ashley, and also Aaron. And then you also have to throw in Danielle Morgan, who got accepted to Gonzaga, Division I university. So, I mean, it's a very, very loaded group, but it's one of those things where you could kind of see the future of college basketball out on that floor. Same thing on the guys' side as well.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that South roster. I think the South might be the favorite in both of those. I don't know if it's going to be close, but looking at that South girls matchup,
South girls should definitely be favored.
I definitely think the South girls would be
boys
favorites with the Righetti and Cabrillo girls they have. So I think the North has their work cut out for them on both sides. Maybe the boys' game will be a little bit closer. Kyle Colvin's on the North boys from Mission Prep. We saw him light it up over the last couple of years, so that might be a little closer. But with the Santa Maria guys that the South will have, Joey Navarez, John Ramos, and Blake Truitt, along with the Cabrillo guys like Austin Olson and Leandrew Knight, and a little bit of reunion of sorts with Jordan Tyler, reuniting with some of his Cabrillo teammates. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So head out to the Kiwanis game. It's at Hancock. Not too expensive to get to, so it should be a lot of fun if you guys want to get one final basketball game in. And they're all seniors, so it's a senior kind of thing for them. So this would probably be the last chance you'll have to see a lot of these guys play in the area. So that's Saturday night, and that's our show for this week, 805 Sports Talk. Be sure to check out SantaMariaTimes.com, and in the print edition, we'll be covering a lot of LPL and Pac-8, baseball, softball, tennis, and everything else the rest of this week. That's all we got for this week, though. Thank you guys for tuning in to 805 Sports Talk.